So I am reading to you from Charlotte's Kisses. This is my draft copy because it hasn't released yet. So you can see my little mark. But this is my new series, Rakes, Rogues, and Scoundrels. It's pretty steamy. It's a little edgier than what I have been writing. So I'm super excited about it. I hope readers love it.
All right. And what scene are you reading for us?
So I am reading the scene when Charlotte and Hugh first meet and first see each other.
How
So,
exciting.
there is a masquerade ball, and I love masquerade balls. I know some people love them. Some people are like, oh, masquerade balls. How do they? They're in their masks. Of course, they know. You can tell who someone is in their mask, but these two haven't met each other before. So,
Awesome.
okay. Standing beneath the canopy of a large oak, Charlotte closed her eyes and exhaled. After visiting Cricket in the barn, talking to Billy, and a few minutes in the gardens, her spirits lifted and she'd experienced an epiphany. She was done cowering to her stepmother, to the cruel women in the town, to everyone. From this minute forward, she would be her own woman. She would say what she thought and do what she wanted, and no one would embarrass or talk down to her. Considering the last decade, what other choice did she have? Despite Susanna's cruel eccentricities and desire for wealth and power, Charlotte and Alexander had done their best to make her feel welcome. When Charlotte invited the new Marchioness on her daily constitutionals, the woman declined with her nose in the air. Charlotte planned delightful picnics until the Marchioness had her favorite picnic basket burned. Ants, the Marchioness had screeched. Destroy it now, she told her staff of caped men. Charlotte had stoically swallowed tears as she watched the wicker catch fire and disintegrate, knowing full well it was insect-free. Susanna simply loved destroying Charlotte's precious possessions. And then Charlotte could not think about the incident without tearing up. Her stepmother had set Charlotte's lovebirds free. She denied it vehemently, but the birds were merrily singing on Charlotte's balcony in the morning and gone by that afternoon. The cage door had been closed and latched. How in the dickens would two little birds have escaped, then closed and locked their own door? And Charlotte had adored Romeo and Juliet with all her heart. If she replaced them, who knew what Susanna would do? Despite all the heinous things Susanna had done, Charlotte attempted to join her in the drawing room each evening. She would order them warm cups of chocolate and biscuits. How was your day, my lady? She would ask. Her stepmother would snort and then ensure there was a heaping dose of cutting insults served alongside their evening repast. Twice she'd poured the chocolate on Charlotte's embroidery, claiming it was an accident. Charlotte, someone behind her said. She recognized that voice. Lord Nash. Dash it all. Not now, not when she was in the middle of making a plan to fix her life. Even though her father hoped for a match between Charlotte and George Nash, they should not be alone. She feigned a smile, then faced him. His red mask, which matched the brilliant shade of his waistcoat, swung from his fingers. Good evening, my lord. Good evening, my lady. Are you well? He asked. When you left the ballroom, you seemed quite distraught. I'm having a lovely time. Apparently, her new forthright personality did not involve honesty, but we cannot be alone without a chaperone. Of course, my lady. He bowed. Now that I know you are well, I will take my leave. I hope you allow me to add my name to your dance card. Ha! And her stepmother thought no one would ask her to dance. Perchance when she returned to the ballroom, she would barge right up to Susanna and point out that Lord Nash had asked her. Surely Papa would be delighted, but how to break it to him that she had no interest in courting George without upsetting him, because lately Papa was consumed with something, what she knew not, but his brow was always furrowed, his skin had become an ashen shade of gray, and he disappeared into his study for long periods of time. Meanwhile, his wife's maleficence multiplied. Another epiphany hit with a thud. Instead of tiptoeing around Papa, she'd confront him and ask what the dickens was wrong. Afterwards, she would tell him she did not favor George enough to marry him. Something rustled in the tree line running alongside the gardens. She murmured as she perused the area. Moonlight and lanterns lit up the gardens, but the forest off to one side remained in shadow. There was movement and a crunching sound in the vegetation. She tilted her ear. Perchance 'tis a parcel of deer munching on leaves, she said as she swiveled to face Lord Nash. However, he disappeared into thin air as if he were an apparition or a figment of her imagination. She blinked and rubbed her eyes. Something snapped. Had someone just stepped on a twig? Thereupon there was a resounding crash. Then, heaven forbid, a man's moans. She swallowed hard. George, she croaked. Lord Nash stepped into the light. With his mask now in place, he brushed leaves from his exquisite tailcoat that was much too small for him. Thank heavens you are unharmed. Dare she admit she thought he'd disappeared as if they were in some Gothic ghost story? He sauntered to her. I am well, my lady. Why had she never noticed Lord Nash's toe-curling baritone? Or that his shoulders were extremely broad? In stark contrast, his hips tapered in, giving him the physique of a warrior. She'd always thought his chin a bit pointy. However, when wearing a mask, his jawline was chiseled to perfection. Wait a dash minute. Who was this well-built man in a too-tight coat, and where had he stashed Lord Nash? Where's George? She asked, a sharp edge to her question. The masked stranger softened his voice and cautiously moved as if she were a skittish bird. Do not be afraid, my lady. But she was not afraid of him. Maybe she should be, since it seemed he had incapacitated Lord Nash and stolen his coat and mask. But call her curious, fascinated even. The clomp of approaching footsteps startled her. A moment later, she relaxed, for it seemed Lord Nash had returned for his stolen belongings. Unfortunately, her theory was problematic because it sounded like more than one person stomped toward them. Shite, there's no time to explain. Her mysterious stranger grasped her around the waist. Before she had time to protest, he had pushed her back against the oak, his torso pressed against hers. Kiss me, he demanded. I will not. She'd never kissed anyone, let alone a stranger. Never mind that he was physically attractive, godlike, stunning. Caged between his hard body and the tree trunk, she placed her palms on his chest, intending to push him away. Instead, she halted, frozen in place as the intoxicating scent of spicy ginger enveloped her, wrapping her in its warmth. She inhaled again. Good gracious. Perhaps if she had eaten that dang tart, she might not be in this deprived state, helpless to the charms of this masculine specimen. His lips crashed against hers. When she gasped, his tongue slid into her mouth. This was all too shocking. So why was she sucking on his tongue and rubbing her tingling breast against his pectorals? She moaned like a puppy getting its belly scratched, or perhaps a harlot. But heavens above, apparently she adored being kissed by a masked stranger who had recently drunk ale. Her lover withdrew his tongue and placed his lips to her ear. Please play along, my lady. Yes, she murmured, wrapping her arms around his neck. She would do anything he asked as long as he placed his velvety tongue back into her mouth. She whimpered as he withdrew from her embrace and stepped back. Perhaps she was a horrible kisser. No surprise there, since she had no idea what she was doing. However, she had secretly stolen a few peeks at the scandalous instructional book, The Secret Life of Gentlemen, and some idea of what happened between men and women, unless it wasn't her awkward kissing and he had noticed she looked a frightened pink. Her heart, which had been beating wildly just moments ago, withered as if it were a dried-out old currant. He turned his back to her and backed up until his shoulder blades bumped her nose. Please excuse the lady and I, he said. Who in the dickens was he speaking to? Charlotte raised onto her tiptoes to peer over his shoulder. So much for the noise in the farce being hungry deer or disgruntled Nash. 3 of her stepmother's staff stood gawking. Pardon us, sir, my lord, Leon said. Have you seen a bloke run through here about your height and build, brown tailcoat? Caught behaving like a Jezebel, she was ruined. Her stepmother would smirk. I have told you she was worthless, she would say to everyone. Her father would huff and then lock himself in his study. Alexander might be her only ally, but only if she could get him to put away his books for a moment and listen to her tale. Charlotte winced at the horror of her predicament. She hid behind the gentleman, who apparently owned a brown coat and was on the run from her stepmother. Wait a minute. If he was her stepmother's enemy, perchance he was her friend. What a pleasant thought. Remaining concealed behind the wall of muscle, she called out, Yes, I saw him. Her lover stiffened as he peered over his shoulder at her. What lovely blue eyes he had. Unfortunately, they morphed into little slits that contained hellfire. Do not, he growled at her. Heavens, even his growl was appealing. He went that way. Charlotte swung her hand over her human shield's head and pointed into the forest. Thank you, Miss, Leon said. Hurry before he gets away, she said. Sending her enemy in the wrong direction filled her with effervescent bubbles that threatened to burst forth in a giggle, although perchance what she truly celebrated was the bold new Charlotte who planned to continue kissing this masked stranger.